The Senate voted to raise the nation's debt limit into December after 11 Republicans broke ranks to join Democrats in breaking a filibuster. The short-term increase now heads to the House. A deadly mosque attack in Afghanistan, ISIS-K claiming responsibility, 46 killed and over 100 wounded. And a federal judge in Texas has blocked the state's controversial 6-week abortion ban, the judge siding with the federal government, calling the ban unconstitutional. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's begin once again in the nation's capital. The short-term deal to boost the debt ceiling now heading to the House. It cleared the Senate late Thursday with 11 Republicans breaking ranks to help Democrats pass it. That's to avoid the first potential default in American history.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 48.
The deal between Senate leaders calls for increasing the borrowing cap by $480 billion. That's how much the Treasury Department told Congress it needs to get to December 3rd of this year. The Treasury had said the U.S. would run out of money on October 18th. Although some Republicans helped move it past the filibuster, none of them voted yes to raise the borrowing limit. After the vote, Democrat Joe Manchin said he thinks the Senate will eventually work it out.
Everybody together and understand that it's best for both sides. You can fight about a lot of things, but you don't throw this out. This is the most serious thing that we can do, and we're not going to do it anymore.
But Democrat Chris Coons is less optimistic. He would have preferred a longer-term solution.
It means, unfortunately, that we will be right back here in 2 months needing another vote configured exactly like tonight's vote in order to raise or suspend the debt ceiling going forward.
The White House says the short-term deal is a move in the right direction.
This is a positive step forward, the debt ceiling short-term deal that we're seeing, and it gives us some breathing room.
Next, the House will also have to approve extending the debt ceiling. They are set to vote on it Tuesday. Once approved by the House, it will head to President Biden for his signature. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says now Democrats have time to increase the debt ceiling through reconciliation. That way, Republicans wouldn't have to vote for a longer-term solution. Members of both parties agree not increasing the limit would cause an economic catastrophe. Now, let's take a moment to turn to the international stage, namely Afghanistan. A suicide bomber attacked a mosque in Afghanistan's northeastern Kunduz province on Friday, killing 46 people and wounding more than 140. That's according to a state-run news agency. Video footage shows bodies surrounded by debris inside the mosque. The UN assistance mission in Afghanistan has expressed its concern over reports of very high casualties. In a statement on Twitter, it described the attack as part of a disturbing pattern of violence in the country. Hours after the attack, ISIS-K claimed responsibility in a statement on Telegram. Earlier this week, the group also claimed responsibility for Sunday's attack on a Kabul mosque. Now, speaking of suicide bombers, what about that fateful day when 13 U.S. troops died at the Kabul International Airport? According to multiple reports, the ISIS-K suicide bomber was a prisoner at the Bagram Air Base just days before the deadly attack. 2 U.S. officials confirmed the dead attacker's identity to CNN. The U.S. turned over the base to Afghan forces in July. When the Taliban offensive swept over the area, thousands of prisoners were released. According to reports, among those free, the suicide bomber. Fox News and CNN reported the bomber was freed on August 15th when the Taliban took over the base. That's citing multiple officials and a congressional representative briefed by national security officials. CENTCOM says because the investigation is ongoing, no further information can be released at this time. Now, what about the Americans and Afghan allies still in the country after the full U.S. troop withdrawal? Senator Richard Blumenthal said on Thursday nearly 800 people who had been stranded in Afghanistan have arrived in Qatar. He said they are now safe. The Senate Democrats said that 2 planes, which were chartered by the International Development Organization, had arrived with hundreds of brave, resilient Americans and Afghan allies on board. Blumenthal thanked volunteers and advocates for their help, noting in particular Albania and Qatar had assisted the U.S. in evacuating the Americans and allies. This follows Representative Michael McCall saying in early September that 6 aircraft carrying evacuees could not leave because the Taliban was, quote, holding them hostage for demands. At that time, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said at a news conference that he was not aware of anyone being held on an aircraft for any hostage life situation. He did acknowledge at the time, quote, "We've been able to identify a relatively small number of Americans who we believe are seeking to depart from the airport with their families." And Senator Blumenthal ended by saying, "We have a moral humanitarian obligation to protect and evacuate these friends and allies. Until the U.S. government honors their promise to evacuate Afghan partners, our work will continue." Now, let's touch on a different border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas are in Mexico City. They are meeting with their Mexican counterparts to discuss a new security agreement called the U.S.-Mexico Bicentennial Framework for Security, Public Health, and Safe Communities. The agreement aims to coordinate security measures between the two governments. Dialogue between the officials will work to address the factors that create security challenges across the border. The U.S. is concerned with drug trafficking from Mexico, while Mexico is frustrated with firearms crossing over from the U.S. The talks represent a return to meetings between White House officials and Mexican leaders. And in Mexico, military and National Guard personnel found 3 trucks with 6 refrigerated containers in which 652 migrants were being transported. 355 of those were minors, many of them traveling alone. Initial reports indicate the migrants came from Puebla and were destined for Monterrey. Local authorities say 4 people have been arrested while the case is investigated. And of these immigrants, 564 are from Guatemala, 39 from Honduras, 20 from El Salvador, 28 from Nicaragua, and 1 from Belize. Among them, 197 are minors traveling alone. Now, speaking of the border, let's take a moment to touch on the Lone Star State. A federal judge in Texas has blocked the state's controversial 6-week abortion ban. The bill's design, which allows any private citizen to sue anyone who facilitates an abortion, has made it difficult for abortion rights advocates to legally challenge it. The judge siding with the federal government, calling the ban unconstitutional. In the 114-page ruling, Judge Robert Pitman wrote, "From the moment SB 8 went into effect, women have been unlawfully prevented from exercising control over their lives in ways that are protected by the Constitution." He went on to say that other courts may find a way to avoid the conclusion is theirs to decide. This court will not sanction one more day of this offensive deprivation of such an important right. The decision comes just days after thousands rallied at the Texas state capitol in support of reproductive rights. The Justice Department sued Texas on September 9th, more than a week after the law went into effect. Most clinics have been in compliance, forcing people to go out of state to have an abortion if they were more than 6 weeks into their pregnancies. In a statement, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland praised the ruling, calling it a victory for women in Texas and for the rule of law. But Texas Right to Life, a pro-life group which advocated for SB 8 in the state legislature, branded the decision as wildly broad and astonishing. The group said in a statement, "The provision blocking lawmakers is entirely unnecessary, since the language of the Texas Heartbeat Act already prohibits government officials from enforcing the policy." However, Pittman's effort to obstruct state judges and court clerks from fulfilling their lawful duties is astonishing. Texas has already indicated it plans to appeal the ruling. The issue ultimately likely will land before the Supreme Court. And now, before we end, in some lighter news, the man who composed the music for the Broadway play Cats has plenty to say about the 2019 film adaptation of his work. And it's not good. Tony, Grammy, and Academy Award-winning composer Andrew Lloyd Webber told Variety, "The film was so bad it made him buy a dog." Webber jokes the film left him emotionally damaged enough to get his Havanese declared a therapy dog by an unnamed airline. According to Webber, when the airline asked for proof the dog was needed, his response instructed them to look at what Hollywood did to his musical. Webber says he then got an approval with a note reading, "No doctor's report required." Webber isn't alone in his sentiments toward the big-budget Hollywood adaptation of Cats. It has a 20% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and won 6 Razzie Awards last year, including Worst Picture. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and have a wonderful weekend.